Hello, and welcome back. Did you know that today is already the fourth video in our Advanced Studies Exam Readiness series? So far in the previous videos, we've already covered the format of the paper, commonly used verbs that you will see in the question paper. We've looked at question 1 on injuries, and today we're going to be looking at question 2 on components of fitness. But before we get into today's content, let's talk a little bit about full answers. So what does it mean to give a full answer? Okay, so I think it's important to remember that when you are writing your answers in your answer script, or when you are answering the question paper, you're answering it as if the person who is marking has no idea what dance studies is or what the content is, right? You're writing it as if you are explaining to a friend of yours at school who doesn't do dance. So don't presume when you answer that the person who's reading, they know what I'm talking about. No, you need to answer in full. And when the verbs, remember we spoke about verbs in video 2, you need to answer in full, especially when the question is asking you either to explain, describe, discuss, analyze, yeah? So remember we spoke about those verbs, meaning you need to give the details. So when you see that, you cannot give a one-word answer, right? You need to explain it in full. So if you're making a statement, you need to follow through with the statement. You can't just leave us hanging there. Okay, so let's make like a silly little example, right? Say for example, the question is, explain 3 ways in which you prepared to make this video today. Yeah, that's the question. Explain 3 ways in which you prepared to make this video today. And my answer is notes, camera, sound. That's all I write. Notes, camera, sound. Do you think that that would be a sufficient answer? Yeah. Firstly, it asked me to explain, and I haven't explained. I've just listed So already I haven't done what the verb is asking me. And secondly, I haven't elaborated. I haven't said it in full. So how is the person who's reading or listening to me going to understand exactly what it is that I mean, right? So what would be a better way to answer that question? What would I say? Firstly, I made notes so that I know what I'm meant to be saying and I don't go off in some other tangent talking about things that I'm not supposed to be talking about in the video, right? Secondly, I make sure that I've positioned my camera in the right spot so that I can make sure that I am in the middle of the frame and the viewers can see me. Thirdly, I did a sound test so that I can check that my voice is audible and that there isn't any background sound coming in from somewhere else that makes it difficult for people to hear me. Yeah? So those 3 answers were answered in full. I didn't just go ba, ba, ba. Okay, so let's do a dance example now. Let's do one on components of fitness, seeing as that is the question we're talking about. So maybe the question reads, explain 3 ways a dancer could improve their cardiovascular fitness, for example, right? Explain 3 ways a dancer could improve their cardiovascular fitness. And you, for example, say run, aerobic exercises 3 times a week. That's your answer. Run, aerobic exercises 3 times a week. Have you explained or have you listed, right? Because those one-word answers are actually not going to get you any marks. So if the question says explain, you need to unpack it. You need to unpack the detail, right? So what would be a better way of answering that question, right? Let's look at each one of those things because they're valid, but you just haven't answered them in full. So what could we say at run? Yeah, so we could maybe say something like, I would run at the beginning of each dance class so that I can improve my endurance, right? Because that already explains it. I would run at the beginning of each dance class so that I can improve my endurance. The second one we looked at was do aerobics. Okay, so I would do aerobic exercises because those exercises target the heart and lungs. And we know cardiovascular has to do with heart and lungs. The third one, we said 3 times a week. I would exercise. So can you see I'm answering in a full sentence each time. I would exercise 3 times a week so that I'm exercising regularly, and in that way I will over time improve my cardiovascular fitness. So writing in full, remember when the verbs are things like explain, describe, discuss, evaluate, analyze, all those things that we looked at in video 2, remember you need to answer in full sentences in order to get those marks. So those one-word answers are not going to get you any marks. Remember to answer in full. Okay, so now let's look at the specific content for question 2 on components of fitness, right? What are the things that you could be asked? So there are 5 different things you could be asked here. Firstly, you could be asked the definitions. So in other words, you need to be able to define each one of the 5 components of fitness. Secondly, you could be asked how to develop them. Thirdly, you could be asked how the components of fitness enhance your dancing. Yeah, so what is their benefit? And then the opposite to that, can you see a pattern here? In injuries, we also had an opposite. The opposite to the benefits would be the disadvantages if you don't have it. So what happens if your components of fitness are lacking? How does that affect your dance performance and your technique? And then lastly, you could be asked to analyze images. Remember, in this question, there is often an image used in question 2 that asks you to look at the image, analyze what's happening there, how the components of fitness are helping the dancer in that position, which components of fitness you think are being used in that image. So analyzing images on how the components of fitness are being used. Okay, so let's go a little bit more in detail now with each of those 5 things. Right, let's start at definitions first. So before you can define it, you need to be able to name the 5, right? You need to be able to remember them and recall them. So can you remember each one of the 5 components of fitness? They are strength, flexibility, core stability, neuromuscular skills, and endurance. Okay, so how do you remember those 5? I have a silly little trick, but it works, right? Okay, so if you think about your fingers, right? The 5 fingers, and you associate each one of the components of fitness with it, right? So my thumb, this is the one that I use the most, and it is the strongest finger of the 5, so strength. The second finger, this is the one that can move the most. It's got the most mobility, so flexibility. The third one, this is the finger in the middle, so it balances the others, so core stability. The fourth one, this is the one that really requires a lot of concentration in order for me to move it around, so neuromuscular skills. And in the pinky, Achshayim had to wait all that time before we got to this one, so endurance. Okay, I know it's a silly little way, but for me it works. So Find those little tricks when you need to remember things. Sometimes it's an acronym, sometimes it's just a silly little rhyme or a song or something that you've made up in your mind, but it actually helps you recall and remember. So find those little things for yourself. Okay, so once you can name them, when it comes to definitions, right? A definition explains what that thing is. But when you are giving a definition, you can't use that same word in the name in your definition, right? For example, maybe the question says, give a definition of core stability. And you say, when my core stability is when my core is stable. Or give a definition of flexibility, when my body is flexible. Guys, you're just using the same word. That's already in the name, right? So remember, that doesn't give a definition. That doesn't give a clear definition. Remember we said earlier on, you are writing as if you are explaining to somebody that has no idea what you're talking about. Explain it to a friend of yours at school that doesn't do dance. So what are the sorts of things that you need to talk about in those definitions? So when we're talking about strength, you would probably say something about an external force or gravity, right? Something about force and something against gravity. When you're talking about flexibility, you're probably going to say something about ROM. I don't know if you remember ROM, range of movement. So remember, flexibility has to do with range of movements and it has to do with joints. So in your definition somewhere, you're talking about range of movement and you're talking about joints. When you're talking about core stability, remember you're talking about your torso, the muscles of your torso. So it's got to do with the strength and the stability, the strength and the stability and the control of your abdominal and your back muscles. It's got to do with this section of the body. When you're talking about neuromuscular skills, the word neuromuscular gives you the clue. So neuro has to do with your nerves, muscular has to do with your muscles. So it's the brain-body connection. Something along those lines in your definition. And then endurance, remember endurance has to do with time, the amount of time something takes. So doing something for a long period of time. Those words need to appear somewhere in your definition. Right, and then besides the definitions, remember, some of the components of fitness have a little bit more to them. There's a little bit more that you need to know for those ones. So, for example, when we're talking about endurance, you've got to know that there are two types there. So, there's a little bit more that you need to know at endurance. Remember, endurance is either cardiorespiratory endurance or muscular endurance. So there's a little bit more that you need to know there. Then also with flexibility, there's a little bit more that you need to know there, because with flexibility goes stretching. So you need to know a little bit about safe stretching, what safe stretching is, and the difference between static and dynamic stretching. So remember, static means still, held, not moving. Dynamic stretching is to do with moving the body through its range of motion. And then also to do with neuromuscular skills, remember there are a few different skills that you need to know here that fall under neuromuscular skills. So things like balance, agility, kinesthetic awareness, spatial awareness, musicality and rhythm, as well as reactivity. Okay, so remember those 5 components of fitness, definitions. Some of them require a little bit more. Endurance, the 2 types, flexibility, everything to do with stretching, and then neuromuscular skills, there are specific skills that you need to know what they are that fall under neuromuscular skills. Okay, where were we? Right, we were talking about developing the components of fitness. So very important, when you see this question in the question paper about how to develop components of fitness or how to improve components of fitness, you've got to look out in the question whether it specifies inside the dance class or outside the dance class, or both, or sometimes the question doesn't specify. But you need to look out for that. For example, if the question says, how do you develop cardiovascular endurance in the dance class, and you are talking about running around the block at home and going to gym to do aerobics, you're not actually answering the question, because now you're speaking about things outside of the dance class. So look out for that first. Are they talking about inside the dance class or outside of the dance class, or isn't it specified when we're talking about developing components of fitness? Right, when it comes to how to develop, there are 3 things that you need to mention here. Okay, so the first thing is specific exercises for the specific components of fitness, and in some cases for specific body parts. Okay, so I think we get the idea. We're talking about specifics here. Right, so let's do an example just to illustrate what I'm saying. So say for example you want to develop upper body strength. You want to improve your upper body strength, and you are squatting every single day in order to do that. Yes, it's a strengthening exercise, but it's not specific to the body part that you want to target. If you want to be improving upper body strength, you're going to have to do things like push-ups, So the load has to be on the upper body. So specific exercises for specific body parts and for specific components of fitness. Secondly, we're talking about regular or consistent exercise. So say for example you want to improve your components of fitness and you work out a little plan for yourself. I'm going to exercise 3 times per week for 20 minutes at a time. Okay, so there's no use you do that for the first 3 weeks and then it doesn't happen ever again after that, right? Because then you're not going to improve your components of fitness. Think about what it feels like to come back to dancing or back to dance class after you've had a long holiday. It's challenging at the beginning because your body's had a break now and now you have to build up all of those components of fitness from the start, from scratch again. You lose it so quickly. So the second thing is regular and consistent exercise. The third thing is the overload principle. Okay, I know that sounds like, woo, the overload principle, what is that? It's actually very simple. All the overload principle means is do more. Yeah? Do more. That's all it means. So remember, your body is very, very, very clever. When you start doing something, yes, it's going to be challenging in the beginning. But over time, if you're doing that same thing, your body quickly adjusts and then it's not challenging anymore. And then your body kind of stays at the same level. So in order to challenge yourself, you need to do more. In other words, apply the overload principle. So what it means is sometimes you will have to increase the intensity. So maybe you start off walking, and then when walking is easy, you progress to jogging, and when jogging is easy, you progress to running. Yeah? Or the other way of doing it is you increase the amount of time or the duration that you do something for. So maybe in week 1, you are walking for 20 minutes at a time. Next week, you realize, oh, but that's easy now. So now I'm going to walk for 25 minutes at a time. And the next week, it's going to be 30 minutes at a time. Okay, so that simply put is how the overload principle works. Alright, so now let's talk about the benefits of having the components of fitness, or how does it enhance your dance performance and your technique. Okay, so we're actually going to use a little video for this one, right? So when the components of fitness are in place, what does dance look like? Is it pleasing to watch? Does the dancer make the movements look easy even though they are difficult? Yeah. So for this one, I'm going to give you 6 little lead-in questions that are going to guide you for what to look for in the video. And then you can decide for yourself whether the components of fitness are in place, whether they are established and developed, or whether they are lacking. Okay, so these are your 6 questions. Number 1, does this dancer make the dance look effortless? Does it look easy? Number 2, does this dancer have power and strength in their movements? Number 3, does this dancer have a wide range of movement? Number 4, can the dancer control the movements that he's doing? Number 5, does this dancer show interpretation and musicality in his movements? In other words, can he communicate meaning behind the movement? And lastly, did the performance quality and the energy of the movements remain good from beginning to the end of the dance? Okay, and when you're watching and when you're looking at those questions, when you answer each one of them, give specific examples from certain points in the video, because that essentially is what you are doing when you are analyzing a picture in your dance question paper. How did we do on analyzing the video? Were you able to answer the 6 questions? You can actually leave them down in the comments section below if you want, and we can get a feel for how different people analyze the components of fitness used in the video clip. Alright, now when we talk about the disadvantages, in other words, what happens if you don't have the components of fitness, I want you to actually reflect. I want you to think back to when you started dancing. Yeah, it might have been in grade 8 or grade 10 or even before that, whenever. We're all beginners at some point. I want you to use those same 6 questions that we just used for the video that we saw and think back to when you started and ask yourself those same 6 questions of your own dancing. Yeah, and I think your answers will probably be very, very different to what you answered for the video clip. And that's okay. Remember, we're all beginners at something, at some point. So most probably when you were a beginner, your components of fitness were lacking because you hadn't put in enough time yet, you hadn't practiced enough and had enough training. So that would probably answer what the disadvantages are when your components of fitness are not in place. So what does the dance look like and what does the dance feel like when the components of fitness are not in place or are not developed? And what does the dance look and feel like when the components of fitness are developed? 2 very different things. So remember, in this particular question, in your question paper, this is usually the one where you actually get an image to analyze. So we're not going to look at an image in this video, but what you can do is you can actually go back to the video we just analyzed and pause it at certain points, and then you've got your still images. And in that way, you can practice how to analyze an image in preparation for this particular question. And remember, when we're analyzing in theory, yes, we're looking at all of the components of fitness separately, but in practice, when you're moving, they actually all work together. They work together in order for you to perform. Right, and that wraps up our question 2 on components of fitness. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, leave them in the comments section below, and we would love to engage with you and get a feel for how your exam revision is going. Do let us know in the comments section, and we will see you, or I will see you rather, because there's no we here. I will see you in the next one. Bye.